everyone. You've made it to the final Monday. Congratulations. This is the final week, as you know. Congratulations. Next Monday, you do not need to be here because I will not be here. I believe our final exam for this class, while I'm thinking about it, I think I put that on your assignment sheet. But your final exam is Tuesday, a week from tomorrow. Should be a week from tomorrow, 10:30 to 12:30. And I don't anticipate you needing the entire time for your exam because the final exam is not comprehensive or cumulative. Okay? It's just going to be, well, the focus will be over just the last unit. Now, of course, you'll still need to know how to spell triads, and things like that, and know your key signatures, of course, but I think that goes without saying, so anyways, yeah, hopefully it's already marked on your calendar, a week from tomorrow at 10:30. It should be in this room, this very room, so. Okay, I've got everything that I've got graded up to this point returned to you. So I would like you to take out, if you haven't already, the handout that you have for today. The top section was a couple short progressions that asked you to part write those chords there, and those chords included some 4/6 chords, which we talked about last class. The doubling rules for. The second section, middle section, is analysis with analyzing non-chord tones and labeling non-chord tones. And then the bottom section was a short table to see how well you know your doubling guidelines, your doubling rules for those particular chords in those particular progressions. So, I think this is what I'd like to do for this assignment today. I would like to go over section 1, the top section with the part writing. I'd like to cover those answers, show you those answers. And then I'd like to give you some time to ask questions for the analysis in the middle and for the table at the bottom. And then after that, I'd like to give you another copy from your homework quiz just for the middle and the bottom sections, okay? So that's kind of what my plan is to do for the next, say 15 minutes, or however long it takes us. So I'm going to start by turning on the TVs here, and hopefully the document camera will work so I can show you my answers, my part writing for the top section. So this is what I have for my part rating for the inner voices for these two. Definitely check it against yours. I'm not saying that your inner voices have to be exactly like mine, but I would think they should be pretty close. And if you're not sure, certainly ask about a particular situation or instance. And maybe I'll be able to picture it or envision it and tell you if you would have any part writing errors or not. Obviously, in the first example off to the left, do you have a sharp on your F in your 5 chord? Oh, how can we train you to do that? Because that doesn't go away. I mean, you have to do that throughout Theory 2, Theory 3, and Theory 4. Always when you're in a minor key and you have scale degree 7 of the key in a chord, you've got to raise scale degree 7 with an accidental. And so the 5 chord always contains scale degree 7, which in G minor is F sharp. So you've got to put the sharp on your F wherever it is to make it a major sounding 5 chord, not a poor, a lousy minor sounding 5 chord. Did you have a question?
Yeah.
Okay.
How far are the tenor and alto allowed to be? because for the last two notes in the first one, I had it switched.
Okay, the tenor and the alto are allowed to be up to an octave apart. So are you talking about for number one or for
For
number
number one, the last two notes in it.
The last two chords?
Yeah, I flipped
So
it.
you would have, okay, so you would have an A in the alto for the two diminished six?
Yes.
Okay, is it in the staff or is there a couple other ones?
It's in the staff.
Yeah, then that's gonna, and I would assume your E flat then in the tenor is down in the staff?
Yep.
Yeah, that's too far apart, that's right. And I would assume then that the F sharp and the D in the next chord are too far apart as
Yep.
well. Yeah. Good question, good question. Remember, in the minor 4/6 chord, which is what we have in this example, you want to avoid doubling the bass. You do not want to have two E flats in that chord. That's why I doubled another chord tone. I happened to double the G in that C flat G chord. And recall also from last class that the major 4/6, which is over in this example, you may feel free to double any chord tone as long as it doesn't create parallel fifths, octaves, or unisixths. So, for example, I don't know how you did your inner voices for this example in E flat major over here. But if you wrote an A flat in the tenor, if you doubled the A flat instead of the C like I did, and then you went from that A flat to a B flat in the next chord in the tenor, you very likely will have parallel fifths with the alto. See, if I had an A flat in the tenor here, with my E flat in the alto, and then I went to B flat in the tenor, and an F also in the alto, then I would have created parallel perfect fifths, which is bad. So that's why I decided to double another closely related pitch, the C. I decided to double that, so I wouldn't get parallel fifths or octaves.
Did I do this?
D, C? No, because you created parallel octaves with this.
Okay.
Good, other questions?
Just
Yes?
like clarification.
Uh-huh.
So when you move apart and you say the leap is too far, would a leap that's too far, would that be like a major third or higher, or?
No, a leap that's too big from one, as you go in the same voice from one chord to the next, you want to avoid leaps of certainly fifths, sixths, sevenths, octaves, and larger than that. Sometimes you can leap from one chord, you can leap up or down a fourth sometimes, but that's the borderline. Especially when you don't have to leap fourths, you should be leaping thirds, or you shouldn't be leaping at all, because there's usually another chord tone available, or another note that you can double in the chord that's closer. Yeah. So fourths are where I kind of draw them out. In the upper voices, by the way. The bass can leap an octave, it leaps quite often. But the tenor, the alto, and the soprano, you should try to not have them leap more than a fourth as you go from one chord to the next. There's usually something smoother, closer, or more available to those voices. Okay, good. Other questions? Before I take some questions on the other part. All right. Good. Then how about this? Let me go ahead and ask if you have any questions about the middle section or the bottom section. Okay, go ahead.
Can you go over the last blank of the middle section?
The last blank in the middle section. So you're talking about a Roman numeral analysis for a chord? All right, yeah, let's do that. So this is really the second beat of the last measure. And we're in the key of C minor. And I guess I could write it up here. We have a G in the bass. We have a B natural in the tenor. We have an F in the alto. And then up above, we have this funky rhythmic figure that looks something like this. And the question is, what is this chord in the key of C minor? Well, I can't I don't think that every single note on this beat can all belong to the one and the same chord. So one of the notes here, somewhere on this beat, has to be a non-chord tone. And so I would put parentheses around that. Do you have any idea which one doesn't fit in the chord?
Is it the E flat?
That's right. So I would put parentheses around this, and I would label this as one of the three non-chord tones we know, either passing tone, neighbor tone, or suspension. But all the other notes actually fit in this harmony. If I stack it in thirds, I could get G, B, D, and F. 4 different notes makes it what, a triad or a seventh chord? A seventh chord. The root of the chord is G. So that means the Roman numeral must be some sort of 5. Right? So I would say, to be on the safe side, I would say that this is what we call a capital 5-7. Yep. G, B, D, F, in the key of C minor. It's a major minor 7th chord, a dominant 7th chord. So the only symbol we need with the Roman numeral is just the 7 because its root position is 7th chord. Mm-hmm. Yes.
On that same measure, but beat 1.
Beat 1, okay. There we have, well, let's see, I can maybe squeeze it in here. Let's make this measure a little bit smaller. So we have F, we have D, we have D, we have A flat and B. Okay. All right, I'm trying to take an inventory of all the pitches on this first beat and arrange them in stacked thirds. That makes it the most sense to my mind. So really I've got F, and I've got some D's, and I've got an A flat. Those are the only 3 pitches. Can you arrange those 3 pitches in your mind into stacked thirds? And I hope you would say yes. If you do, D is on the bottom, then there's an F, then there's an A flat. D, F, A flat. The root is D, and we're in the key of C. So what Roman numeral should I use for this chord?
The 2 is lowercase.
Yep, that's right. Okay, and specifically, what type of triad is this? Is it major, minor, augmented, or diminished?
Diminished.
Diminished. So I have to use this with my Roman numeral. And finally, what is the lowest note? It's actually not the root. The F is the lowest note in the music. And so when the third of the chord is on the bottom, what inversion is that?
6.
Yeah, 6 or first inversion, right? So my final answer for that chord would be one of these. Yep, that's what I would do.
What about the leftover D? Would that be any sort of non-chord tone, or is it just part of the chord?
This one here?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's not a non-chord tone. It is the chord tone, right? Just because it's leaping there on the offbeat doesn't necessarily automatically make it not part of the chord. D actually fits in the chord, so I'm gonna count them all, right? And not put parentheses around any note in that beat, because they all fit. So. Okay, yes.
The second beat in the third measure, just which ones are the non-chord tones?
The ones on the and of B2,
Okay.
the non-chord tones.
They both can be it?
Yes, you bet. And then you just look to see, well, they're actually going to be the same type, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, sir.
In the very first beat, is the soprano, is that a suspension there because they have the dot?
On the very first beat of the whole example?
Yeah.
No, it's not a suspension. In fact, the G, the soprano G, it actually fits into both beats. The harmony on both beats, does it not? And so does when it leads up to the C, that's also a chord tone as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so every single thing on beat 1 and 2, they're all chord tones. Yeah. Yes, sir.
How many non-chord tones were there all on the?
You know that in measure 3, the end of beat 2,
Yeah.
if I count those as one non-chord tone, I have 6. But if I count those as 2 separate non-chord tones, then I have 7 in the whole thing. Okay. Let me let that sit and marinate for a few moments while you're looking at your paper thinking. Does anyone have any other questions regarding the middle section or the bottom? Yeah.
Adding on to that, I only found 6, and I just can't find a 7th one.
Well, okay, again, it depends on, are you counting?
Yeah, no, I'm counting them as 2. So that's just me. I didn't know
Okay.
if there was a way to help with that, but that might just be.
Okay, well, let me see if I can break it down a little closer without revealing everything.
Right, right.
In measure 2, I have one non-chord tone in measure 2.
That's the one.
You don't have one
I
there?
don't have one.
Yeah, so there's a non-chord tone in measure 2.
Okay.
Yeah. Did you get the one in measure 2?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Are there 4 in measure 3?
Yes, if you count those 2 on the end of beat
Okay.
2 separately,
I got
yes.
them all now then.
Okay.
Oh, I get it.
There are no non-chord tones in measure 1. And there should be 2 non-chord tones in the last measure. Yeah. Maybe, I don't know if it would help, maybe if I play this at the piano quickly, I don't know if that would help your ear pick up on something. We're in the key of C minor. Does that help your ear find something? Yeah.
Basses can have non-chord tones, correct?
Basses can have non-chord tones, you bet. All voices can. Yeah, that's what makes singing, all 4-part choir, that's what makes singing really interesting. Kind of fun. All right, we were about 20 minutes in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the copy from your homework, and you just take 5 minutes or so to fill it out. Keep your homework out and just put down what you have for your answers right on here. suspension, you have to tell me which of the 4 suspension types it is. You gotta label that. Correct.
Yeah, because that's a core tone, but this one isn't. So yeah, you're right.
Very well. Let me come around the corner. Okay, let me quick show you then what I have, if I have all of the papers now. And I think I only asked you for a little bit of information on this one. And by the way, mine's really old, so it's got all these extra things in there that you don't need to worry about. But if you want to check your Roman numeral analysis, at least of the first 3 bars or so, I've got over here measure 1, a 1, 6, 7, diminished 6, 1. In measure 2, I have a 5, 6, a minor 1, and a 5 with a 4, 3 suspension in the tenor. Then the third measure, I have a couple minor 1s, a minor 4, 6, and a 6. And here are all the 9-chord tones. In fact, every single one in that measure is a passing tone. Passing tone. And then the last measure, what I have is we went over these harmonies, 2 diminished 6, 5, 7, 1. Up here, this is a neighbor tone based on how it's approached and left. And this is a 9/8 suspension based on how it's approached and left. Okay. Then on the other one, other section, I would be hoping that you would, let's see here. Oh, yeah, for the 1, 6, you want to circle both the root and the 5th. The only thing you don't want to double in the 1, 6 is the 3rd of the chord. That's in the bass. For the 7 diminished 6, you could circle the 3rd and the 5th. But you can't just circle the 5th only. I need the 3rd marked, somewhat circled. Okay.
Can you just circle the 3rd?
Yep, that'll be fine. That'll be fine. This one, you need to circle the 3rd and only the 3rd. Why? Can anyone tell me why? Because it's the deceptive progression, right? It's the 6th chord that comes right after the 5. So we double the 3rd of the 6th chord, not the root in that case. And then finally, this one, you would want to circle root and 5th. Yeah, root and 5th. Not the 3rd, because that's the bass note, and we never double the bass of a 5, 6. Okay, so we move on. What I want to do today is get through as many of the remaining non-chord tones as I can. If I can't get through all of them, then I'm going to probably spend maybe a little bit of time next class just finishing those up before we start reviewing for our test. Okay? So, by the way, all these non-chord tones are found in chapters 11 and 12 of your textbook. No, 12 and 13 are live. Yeah, 12 and 13. And up to this point, we know 3 non-chord tones. We should be somewhat familiar with them. We know the passing tone, we know the neighbor tone, and we know the suspension note. There are more additional types of non-chord tones. In fact, I'd like to teach you about 4 new types of non-chord tones, based on how they're approached and left. A couple things though I need to mention though. Last class I mentioned that suspensions are, well, let me see if I can put a little table here. I mentioned that suspensions are accented non-chord tones. That is, they always land on or occur on a strong beat of the measure or on the strong half of a beat, that is the first half of a beat, when there's more than one note on a beat. Okay? Now, passing tones and neighbor tones, I don't know that I mentioned anything about whether they occur on accented beats or unaccented beats. But passing tones and neighbor tones actually occur on both unaccented beats and accented beats equally frequently. So these 2 particular non-chord tones, the passing and the neighbor tone, they are typically, customarily both. They can be accented or unaccented. We find them in both metric positions just as frequently as the other metric position. So I would say that the passing tone will sometimes occur on strong beats, sometimes it occurs on weak beats in the measure. Same with the neighbor tone. Sometimes it occurs on strong beats, sometimes it occurs on weak beats. They're just, passing tones and neighbor tones are so plentiful that they occur almost everywhere, rhythmically or metrically. Okay? They can occur on strong halves of the beat, the first half of the beat. They can occur on the weak half of the beat, the second half of the beat. They can basically occur anywhere, metrically. Okay? Passing tones are also somewhat unique because passing tones, they're unique because more than one of them can be used consecutively. And I'm going to see if I can illustrate that by showing you this measure over here. I've got a couple measures here in the key of C major with these harmonies, 1, 5, and 1. And if you were to look at all of the notes in the first half of this measure, you would see not all of the notes on beats 1 and 2 are C, E, and G. You see how there's one note in the soprano particularly on beat 2 that doesn't fit in the chord. Right? The F doesn't belong as a C, E, in the C, E, G chord. So I'll put parentheses around it. But if you look at the next beat, beat 3, the chord, as I'm listing here with the Roman numeral, the 5 chord, which is supposed to be G, B, D, do you see how there's also another note in the soprano that doesn't fit in the G, B, D harmony on beat 3? And that is this one right here. The E doesn't fit. The G does fit into this chord here, we're looking for G, B, D. And over here, the G does fit in the chord because we're looking for C, E, G. But these 2 notes, this one doesn't fit in the harmony in which it's found, and this one doesn't fit in the harmony in which it's found. So what I guess I'm trying to say is that because both of these non-chord tones are approached by step, and they're left by step in the same direction, I would have to label both of these non-chord tones as passing tones, PT. And really no other, except for one that I might not even teach you because it's very rare. But the passing tone is really the only main primary type of non-chord tone where you can have more than one occur in a row. In other words, 2 passing tones consecutively. You never have 2 suspensions right in a row. You never have 2 neighbor tones right in a row. But passing tones, you can have 2, one right after the other. And when you have 2 passing tones in a row, then what they do is they fill in the space of a fourth, right? G down to D is a descending perfect fourth. So two passing tones in a row fill in the space of a perfect fourth. One passing tone fills in the space of a third between two notes. So, two passing tones can be used in a row to fill in the space of a fourth. Passing tones can also be chromatic. What does that mean? Well, it means a passing tone can be a pitch that's not only not in the chord, but it can also be a pitch that doesn't belong in the key also. It doesn't belong in the scale or the key that you're working in. So if you take a look at beats 3 and 4 of this measure, you see how this D sharp, that doesn't fit into the GBD harmony. But it also doesn't fit into the whole key that we're dealing with either. So I would say that this is a passing tone because it's approached by a step and left by a step in the same direction. But it turns out to be a chromatic passing tone. Not only does it not fit in the chord, it also doesn't fit in the key. And by the way, when you have chromatic passing tones, do you see how this chromatic passing tone fills in the space of a major second? Whoa, that's weird, right? Can you fill in, is there a little space in a major second? Can you fill in that space? Yeah, you can, right? D to E, D natural to E natural is a major second. And a chromatic passing tone slides right in between. It's right in the middle there. I'll go to the piano and play this whole example so you can hear what it sounds like. We're in C major. Help me get, there are a couple more I don't know if we have one. Any note in this measure that is not C, E, or G has to be a non-chord tone. Right? Because I'm saying that the whole measure is a Roman numeral 1. So can you see how there's a non-chord tone here, and here, and here, and here, and here, and here? All those notes are neither C, nor E, nor G. What would I label this type of non-chord tone? Neighbor tone, right? It's approached by step, left by step in the opposite direction. How about this one? Same thing. How about the D?
Neighbor tone.
Neighbor tone. How about the B?
Neighbor tone.
Neighbor tone. And how about the F?
Neighbor tone.
Neighbor tone. You see the F is approached by step and left by step in the same direction because it's in the tenor voice. And the B is in the alto voice, it's approached by step and left by step in the same, or in the opposite direction is what I'm trying to say. Yes?
Would those all still be neighboring tones if the G and the E were not there in the middle?
Probably not. Probably not. Yeah. Okay. So, I guess what I need to do now is really, I need to move on and tell you about 4 new types of non-chord tones. And I have a handout for you for this. And I'm going to give that to you right now. Okay, so look at the table at the top of this handout when you get it. The first 3 non-chord tones in the table are ones that we've talked about, the passing tone, the neighbor tone, and the suspension. There are 4 more on this table, though, that we have not talked about yet, and you need to know what they are. Remember, any non-chord tone, all non-chord tones are always classified or identified by how they are approached and how they are left. So if you look in this table, in the handout I just gave you, notice the name of the non-chord tone below the suspension. Another non-chord tone that we need to know about is called the retardation. The retardation is the exact opposite of the suspension. You see how the retardation is approached just like a suspension, that is by the same note? But a retardation is left by a step up rather than a step down. So retardation is the opposite of the suspension. And by the way, for the test, I don't know where I put that. For the test, you will need to have this table memorized. Because I'll give you this table with a bunch of cells or blanks, and you have to fill in the empty blanks in the table. I'll have it partially filled in for you. You'll have to fill in the missing part. Okay, appoggiatura. Yeah, that's how you say that. Appoggiatura. That is a non-chord tone that's approached by a leap and is left by a step. Usually the step is in the opposite direction, but you need to remember appoggiatura is first approached by a leap, then left by a step. The escape tone, that is the opposite of the appoggiatura. It's approached by a step, and then it's left by a leap. Okay? So for the escape tone, the step comes first, the leap comes after it. Finally, there's one more called an anticipation, and that is a non-chord tone that's approached by a step or a leap, but the way you recognize an anticipation is that it is left by a common tone, or the same pitch. An anticipation is left by a common tone, or the same pitch. And by the way, these are the places in the meter, rhythmically speaking, accented or unaccented, where you would locate all of these types of non-chord tones. I put that in the table for you there. So escape tones and anticipations normally occur on unaccented beats or parts of beat. Retardation and appoggiaturas occur on accented beats, accented parts of the beat. That's typically where they're found. Okay? So, again, any kind of non-chord tone is defined or identified by how it is approached and how it's left. So, after talking about this, let me see if I can show you on page 186 in your book. Let me show you an example of all of these. And this comes from example 12-2 on page 186 in your book. There's a couple non-chord tones in here that I don't want to talk about right now, and that's this one called the neighbor group and the one called the pedal tone. So don't worry about those, we'll just skip those for now. Okay. You see in the first measure the passing tone, we already know what that is. There's your passing tone, it's marked there, shaded in green, it's got the parentheses around it. A neighbor tone, we already know what that is. The suspension, we already know what that is. But here's the new one, retardation in the next measure. It's approached by the same note, left by a step up. Okay, the appoggiatura is approached by a leap, left by a step. So we have this sound. That's your typical appoggiatura. In the next measure is your escape tone. Approached by a step, left by a leap. Skip the neighbor group. Finally, the anticipation is left by the same note. That's an anticipation. Left by the same note. Okay, so now you've been introduced to all of these types of non-chord tones. You've heard all of these types of non-chord tones. You've seen them. Now, one of the last things that I want to do, oh, by the way, do you have any questions about these? I mean, we haven't seen them in a detailed context just yet, but yeah.
I guess for the ones that we just learned when we're writing them, what do we use for the abbreviation?
Okay, yeah, usually my abbreviations are a little different than the authors.
Yeah.
The retardation, I actually abbreviated RET. what else do we have? The appoggiatura, I use the same one that the author has, APP. The escape tone, I abbreviate ET, not extraterrestrial. And the anticipation, I guess I use what the author does, and that is I just write ANT, ANT. So those are the abbreviations I use. Retardation, appoggiatura, escape tone, and anticipation. Anticipation.
Does retardation have the same sort of written stuff as suspension?
No, you don't have to deal with any intervals with retardations. Only suspensions go that far and are that involved. Good. So we did that. How about, I'm going to go to another page in your book. Well, let's see here, page 214. This comes from your book, page 214, and I would just like to look at number 3. It says, analyze the NCTs in example 910 on page 139. First of all, what does NCT mean? Non-chord tone, that's right. Analyze the non-chord tones in example 910 on page 139. You'll notice that it says measure 72 has a few, measure 74 has a few, etc., etc. I'm going to go there right now, and the nice thing about this example is that the author has put parentheses around the non-chord tones already for us. But I think we just need to get a little bit of actual analysis, real music analysis of the non-chord tones, and this is found on the top of page 139. Don't worry about my scribbles. I don't know if you can see that very well from where you are. But I'm going to play this, and then we're going to talk about a few of these non-chord tones. Okay. We're in the key of B flat major here. I'm not going to worry about the grace notes, those little itty bitty things in like measure 72 and so forth. Let's talk about, oh, here we go. Do you see the highest note in measure 74? You see that E flat? It's a half note, right on the downbeat. What type of non-chord tone would you say that is based on how it's approached and how it's left? You don't have to give me any specifics just yet. This is the type of non-chord tone.
It is suspension.
That's right, it's a suspension. You see how it's approached from the same note in E flat in the previous measure, and it's left by a step down to go to the D. So that makes it a suspension by definition. Now, can we just go on and say that's enough? No, suspensions we have to also tell me the specific type. How do I find the specific type of suspension? Yeah.
You, like, found the interval from the base.
That's right. And we don't necessarily have anything in the bass clef per se, but we do have a lowest note, don't we, in that measure? So what is the lowest note in that measure 74? It's an F, right? Okay, so what interval, just the size, the quantity, don't worry about the quality. What interval size is E flat above an F?
7.
7? And what interval is the resolution note, the D above an F?
6.
So what kind of suspension is it?
7.
7/6 suspension. That's it exactly. Let's go to measure 75. You see, I'm going to skip some of these. Yeah, I want to skip that. Let's take a look at the B natural. Okay, let's skip the D and the downbeat. Just the B natural, that has parentheses around it. What type of non-chord tone is that based on how it's approached and how it's left in the soprano voice? say?
An appositure?
That's right, an appoggiatura. You see the B natural is approached by a skip from that D before it, and it's left by a step, goes to the C. So that makes it an appoggiatura. Okay, how about, what about the final D eighth note in the highest voice at the end of the first line? What type of non-chord tone is it?
Passing tone.
Passing tone, approached by step, left by step, the same direction. How about in measure 76, what are both the F natural and the F sharp?
Neighboring tone. Are they just passing tones?
Yeah, they're just passing tones, right? Because they're approached from the E flat and they're left by a step in the same direction. So there's two passing tones in a row, remember? So that can happen. And then finally, we'll get out of here, don't worry. What about, oh, they're both the same. The C and the A in the soprano and the alto are both the same type of non-chord tone. No, based on how they're approached and left, be careful. Anticipation, right? They're approached by a step, but they're left by the same pitch. You see how they're left by a common tone? That makes it an anticipation. Anticipation is a chord tone that belongs in the following chord that just comes a little too early. It's anticipating the next chord before it actually arrives. That's what an anticipation is. Okay, now, your assignment sheet says that we're going to do, I think I'm going to give you a review worksheet. That is actually not correct. I'm giving you one last assignment. This is the final assignment of the whole semester. And you should have enough information to do it now. There's a little part writing at the top, there's fill in the table on the bottom, and there's non-chord tone analysis on the back. So this is the last assignment of the semester. I know it's a sad day, please do not shed any tears. And this is for Wednesday. Now you probably have to go to a church to practice.